The note was brief, folded inside a Ziploc bag, tucked beneath the pit bull's worn collar, as he sat trembling on the shoulder of Interstate 40. The handwriting was hurried, almost apologetic. The words were simple, but they would haunt a nation. His name is Duke. We can't keep him. Please give him a good home. Beside the note, the dog waited. Rust-colored coat matted with dust and blood, ribs pressing against skin, one paw wrapped in a dirty t-shirt that smelled like the man who left him. He had been sitting there for 3 days, watching every car that passed, searching for the one sound he knew by heart. The rattle of a failing muffler on a 2004 Honda Civic. Some notes are apologies, but this one carried the weight of a man's cowardice, a woman's silence, and a dog who refused to believe that love could simply drive away and never return. This is a story about loyalty that defied reason, about a journey that should have been impossible, and about how sometimes the ones who love us most are the ones we abandon first. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now let's get back to the story. Eastern Colorado had always been brutal in November. The high plains stretched endlessly in every direction, flat and unforgiving, dotted with truck stops and forgotten towns where the wind never stopped howling. Along I-70, the landscape was painted in shades of brown and gray, dead grass, cracked earth, sky the color of concrete. Tourists passed through on their way to somewhere better, windows rolled up, eyes fixed on distant mountains. They did not stop in towns like Limon. There was nothing to see, nothing to do, just flat country and long roads that made you feel small. But there were quieter places along this highway, rest stops where truckers slept in their cabs, and roadside memorials marked where lives had ended too soon. Mile marker 412 was one of them, a stretch of highway shoulder wide enough for a broken-down car, bordered by a barbed wire fence and an abandoned barn that leaned like a drunk against the wind. This November, an early cold snap had turned the plains brittle and sharp. Most travelers kept their windows up and their heaters on. The temperature dropped below freezing at night, and the wind cut through anything exposed. Mark and Adeline Vance did not stop at mile marker 412 by choice. Mark was 34, a warehouse supervisor from Pennsylvania who had spent the last 2 years convincing himself that a fresh start in Arizona would fix everything. The debt, the arguments, the feeling that his life was smaller than he'd planned. Adeline was 31, a waitress who had learned to swallow her opinions because speaking them only made things harder. 6 months ago, they had been optimistic. They had packed everything they owned into a U-Haul, said goodbye to family, and pointed the car west. Mark had talked about opportunity, about sunshine, about leaving the past behind. Adeline had nodded and tried to believe him. They had brought Duke, their 3-year-old pitbull, because neither of them could imagine leaving him. He had been with them since he was a puppy, sleeping at the foot of their bed, greeting them at the door every single day with a joy that never faded. But somewhere between Pennsylvania and Colorado, things changed. The apartment complex in Phoenix wouldn't allow pit bulls. Breed restrictions, the manager said, her voice flat and final. No exceptions. Mark and Adeline could move in, but Duke could not. They tried. They called shelters in 3 states. Everyone was full. Rescue organizations had waiting lists 6 months long. Trainers cost money they didn't have. Family members said no. They didn't want a pit bull, didn't trust the breed, couldn't take the responsibility. Mark made the decision on November 8th, 2 days before they were supposed to arrive in Phoenix. They would stop along I-70, somewhere rural, somewhere a farmer or rancher might find him and take him in. They would leave food, water, and a note. Someone would help him. Someone always did. Adeline tried to argue. She tried once, but Mark's jaw set in that way it did when his mind was made up. And she knew, she had always known, that her voice did not carry the weight his did. Part of Mark believed he was being practical. Part of him knew he was being a coward. But guilt is a thing you can bury if you drive fast enough and never look back. November 8th came with bitter wind. Mark pulled off at mile marker 412 just after 3 p.m. Same as planned. Adeline sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisted in her lap, her yellow scarf pulled tight around her neck. A scarf Duke had once tugged playfully as a puppy. Outside, the wind howled across the plains. The temperature had dropped throughout the day, and now clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening. Mark opened the back door. Duke jumped out immediately, tail wagging, ready for whatever came next. He trusted them completely. Mark led him 20 feet from the highway, near the fence line. He took off his jacket, the one Duke loved to sleep on, and laid it on the ground. He set down a bag of kibble, 2 bottles of water, and the note. Adeline stayed in the car. She could not watch, but she could not close her eyes either. Mark knelt down and scratched Duke behind the ears one last time. "Good boy," he whispered. The words tasted like ash. Then he stood, walked back to the car, and got in. Duke followed. Mark closed the door. Duke sat outside it, confused but patient, waiting for the command to jump in. The engine started. Duke's tail wagged. The car began to move. Duke stood, alert now, watching. Adeline looked back, just once, long enough to see Duke running behind them, head low, legs pumping, desperately trying to keep up. She saw the moment he realized they weren't stopping. She saw him slow, then stop completely, standing in the middle of that empty highway, watching them disappear. She turned forward and closed her eyes. Mark did not look back. He told himself it was already done, that someone would find him, that this was not cruelty, just necessity. But what they didn't know was that Duke had memorized the sound of that engine, the smell of Mark's jacket, the direction they had been driving for 6 days straight. And that night, hungry, confused, and utterly alone, Duke made a decision that would defy every law of nature, distance, and survival itself. Because while humans justify, dogs remember. And 3 months later, when Duke finally collapsed on a porch 1,847 miles away, what his body showed, what he had endured, and what he still believed about the people who left him behind, would break the hearts of millions. This is not just a story about a dog. It's a story about guilt that cannot be outrun, loyalty that cannot be killed, and a love that refused to die, even when it should have. If you want to hear stories that will move you, challenge you, and remind you what truly matters, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because Duke's journey is just beginning, and what happens next will stay with you long after this video ends. Max had no idea this would be the last time he'd feel grass beneath his paws with them beside him. His tail whipped side to side as Mark opened the car door at the rest stop. Trees, open sky, the scent of pine and distant water. Everything about this moment screamed adventure, and Max lived for adventure. He bounded out, muscles coiled and ready, eyes bright with the kind of trust only a dog can give. "Easy boy," Mark said, but his voice had an edge Max didn't recognize. Adeline stood by the passenger door, arms crossed, staring at the ground. Her jaw was tight. She hadn't looked at Max since they'd pulled off the highway 20 minutes ago. That should have been the first sign. But Max didn't know how to read guilt. He only knew love. Mark clipped the leash on and led him toward the trailhead. Max pulled forward, eager, convinced this was just another stop on their cross-country trip. There'd been so many already. Gas stations, motels, fast food parking lots, where Mark would sneak him fries when Adeline wasn't looking. This was just another one. It had to be, but Mark's hand trembled on the leash. "We can't do this," Adeline whispered, 10 steps behind them. Mark didn't turn around. "We already decided." "That doesn't make it right." Max glanced back at her voice. Something felt wrong. The air between them was sharp, fractured. He slowed his pace, instinct telling him to stay close, to fix whatever was breaking. "Come on, Max," Mark said, voice flat, hollow. They walked deeper into the trees, Max between them, his ears swiveling at every sound. A squirrel darted across the path. Normally he'd lunge. Today he stayed still, focused on the people who'd raised him since he was 8 weeks old. Mark stopped at a clearing. Sunlight cut through the branches in fractured beams. He unclipped the leash. Max sat immediately. "Good boy. Always a good boy." "Mark," Adeline's voice cracked. "Don't." He didn't look at her. Didn't look at Max. Just turned and walked back toward the car. Max waited. This was a game, right? The kind where they hid and he had to find them. He'd played it 100 times. He was good at it. But Adeline followed Mark, and neither of them called his name. Max stood, took 2 steps forward, stopped. Mark's boots crunched over gravel. The car door opened. Max's ears pricked. He trotted after them, tail still wagging, but lower now, uncertain. He reached the edge of the clearing, just as Adeline climbed into the passenger seat. She turned her head. Their eyes met. Hers were wet. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. The door slammed. Max barked once. Sharp. Confused. "Wait. I'm here. I'm right here." The engine roared to life. Max ran. His paws hit pavement as the car lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. He chased it, full sprint, lungs burning, because this had to be a mistake. They forgot him. They'd realize. They'd stop. The car didn't stop. It accelerated. Max ran harder. Faster. His claws scraped asphalt. His chest heaved. The car grew smaller. Smaller. A red dot against the horizon. And then it was gone. Max stood in the middle of the empty road, panting, staring at the place where the car had disappeared. His tail had stopped wagging. His ears were flat. He waited for the sound of the engine to return. It never did. Max didn't leave the spot, not when the sun dipped below the trees and shadows stretched long across the pavement, not when the temperature dropped and his breath turned to fog, not when his stomach began to ache with a hollowness he'd never felt before. He stayed because good dogs wait, and Max was a good dog. The first night, he curled tight against the roadside, nose tucked under his tail, eyes fixed on the empty highway. Every set of headlights made his heart leap. Every engine sound pulled him to his feet, tail starting its hopeful arc. But the cars always passed. Wrong color, wrong sound, wrong everything. By dawn, his throat was dry, his muscles stiff. He stayed anyway. The second day brought rain, cold, relentless, soaking through his coat until he shivered uncontrollably. He pressed himself against a fallen log for shelter, but water pooled everywhere. His paws sank into mud. His eyes never left the road. A truck slowed near him. A man leaned out the window. "Hey, buddy, you lost?" Max's ears perked. Not Mark's voice. Not Mark's truck. He tucked his head lower. The man idled for a moment, then drove on. Max waited. Hunger became constant on the second night. Sharp, gnawing. He'd never known real hunger before. There'd always been a bowl. Always kibble at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., like clockwork. His stomach cramped. He whimpered, a sound he hated making, a sound that admitted something was wrong. But he didn't leave. The third day, a beetle crawled across his paw. Without thinking, instinct older than his domestication kicked in. He snapped it up, crunched, swallowed. It wasn't food, but it was something. By the third night, confusion had calcified into something darker. Fear. The howls started just after midnight. Max's head shot up. His body went rigid. The sound came from the west, beyond the tree line, high-pitched and eerie. Not dog, not quite wolf either. Coyotes. He'd never seen one, never needed to. But every cell in his body recognized the danger. The howls grew closer. Max stood. His hackles rose, a ridge of bristled fur down his spine. Four shapes emerged from the darkness, lean and ghostly in the moonlight. Yellow eyes reflected back at him. They fanned out, practiced, coordinated. The lead coyote, scarred across the muzzle, tested the air. Max was bigger, but he was alone. Exhausted, starving, the coyote lunged. Max met him halfway. Teeth clashed. Max's jaws found purchase on the coyote's shoulder, and he bit down with everything he had. The coyote yelped, twisted free, blood darkening its fur. But the others circled tighter. One snapped at his hind leg. Max spun, snarling, and caught it across the face. Another darted in from the side. Max pivoted, but not fast enough. Teeth grazed his flank, pain, sharp and immediate. But Max didn't run. He planted his feet, lowered his head, and showed them what a pit bull was built for. Not cruelty, not aggression, but protection. Defense, refusal to break. The lead coyote hesitated, reassessed. Max snarled, low and guttural, a sound from somewhere primal. The coyotes exchanged glances. The injured one limped backward. Then another. The leader held Max's gaze for 3 long seconds, then turned. One by one, they melted back into the darkness. Max stood trembling, blood trickling from the wound on his side. His breath came in ragged gasps. He'd won. But the victory tasted like ash. Because when the adrenaline faded and the silence returned, Max realized something that shattered the last piece of his old life. He wasn't waiting to be found anymore. He was fighting to survive. And survival meant one thing. He had to move. Max started walking at dawn. The wound on his flank had crusted over during the night, stiff and painful. But movement kept it from seizing completely. He limped for the first mile, then found his rhythm. 3 legs bearing weight, one compensating. It wasn't graceful, but it worked. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, east or west, left or right. For most dogs, it would have been impossible. A coin flip with death on both sides. But Max had something most dogs didn't. Memory written in scent. He lifted his nose to the wind and searched. Not with his eyes, not with logic. With the 220 million olfactory receptors that made his nose a biological miracle. The world exploded into layers most humans would never comprehend. Asphalt and rubber, pine sap, and morning dew. Deer musk, 3 days old. A fast food wrapper decomposing in the ditch. And there, barely there, gasoline and exhaust. The ghost of the car. Max's body turned east before his mind caught up. The scent was faint, fractured by wind and rain, but it was there. A thread so thin it might snap if he lost focus. He followed it the way a sailor follows stars. One paw in front of the other. The hours blurred. The sun climbed, then fell. Max didn't stop. His paws began to bleed from the rough pavement, leaving rusty prints behind him. Thirst clawed at his throat, worse than hunger, sharper than pain. By midday, he found water. A drainage ditch cutting through a field, stagnant and thick with algae. It wasn't clean. It probably wasn't safe. Max didn't care. He plunged his muzzle in and drank until his stomach bloated. Some primal part of him knew he might not find water again for days. Hunger was harder. On the second day of walking, Max's legs trembled with exhaustion. His ribs were beginning to show. The beetle had been his last meal, and his body was eating itself from the inside. He stopped at a field just before dusk. Grasshoppers scattered in the tall weeds. Max watched them with the focus of a predator, not a pet. He crouched, waited. When one landed close, he pounced. Too slow. It launched into the air, wings buzzing mockery. Max tried again, and again. His timing improved. His patience sharpened. On the seventh attempt, his jaws snapped shut around the insect. He swallowed it whole, legs still twitching. It wasn't enough, but it was survival. That night, he caught a field mouse. It darted from a burrow, and Max's instincts, honed by desperation, exploded. He pinned it with one paw, jaws closing fast. The mouse squeaked once, then went still. Max ate quickly, guiltily, the way a dog does when stealing food from the counter. But this wasn't stealing. This was staying alive. The scent of the car returned on the third day, stronger now. He'd gained on them somehow, or maybe the wind had shifted in his favor. Either way, Max's pace quickened. His tail, silent for days, gave a single, cautious wag. Then he caught something else. Perfume. Adeline's perfume. Lavender and vanilla. The scent that clung to the passenger seat. The scent that meant safety and scratches behind the ears. And her voice saying, "Good boy, Max, good boy." It hit him like a fist. Max stopped in the middle of the road, body trembling, nose working frantically to hold onto it. The perfume was days old, maybe weeks, clinging to the guardrail where she must have stood, must have touched, must have existed. He pressed his nose against the metal, inhaling until his lungs ached. She'd been here, which meant he was going the right way. Max pulled back, looked down the endless road stretching toward the horizon, and felt something he hadn't felt since the car disappeared. Hope. He started walking again. Faster now. Stronger. Because the scent didn't lie. And if Adeline had been here, then home was ahead. All he had to do was keep moving. The town appeared like a mirage on the seventh day. Max crested a hill and saw it spread below. Buildings, cars, people. Civilization. His tail lifted slightly. Towns meant food, trash cans, maybe someone kind, maybe help. He descended slowly, ribs sharp beneath matted fur, limping on his injured paw. He looked like what he was, a stray. Desperate. Dangerous, if you didn't know better. But Max didn't know how he looked. He only knew he was tired. The first person he approached was a woman loading groceries into her car. Max stopped 10 feet away, tail in a cautious wag, ears forward. Not threatening, not aggressive, just hopeful. The woman turned. Her scream cut the air like glass shattering. "Pitbull! Somebody help! There's a pitbull!" Max froze. He didn't understand the fear in her voice, the way she scrambled backward, groceries spilling across the pavement. He took one step forward, trying to show he was friendly, that he just needed. She threw a can at him. It struck his shoulder. Max yelped, retreated, confusion flooding every nerve. What had he done wrong? He'd waited. He'd been polite. He'd done everything Mark taught him. But the woman was already on her phone, voice shaking. "There's a vicious dog loose in the parking lot. Looks like a fighting dog. Please hurry." Max backed into an alley, heart hammering. Within minutes, the truck arrived. White. Official. The words "Animal Control" stenciled on the side. A man climbed out, carrying a pole with a loop on the end. His partner held a tranquilizer gun. "There," someone pointed, "in the alley." Max's instinct screamed run, but exhaustion had settled into his bones. He was so tired, so hungry. Maybe these people would help. Maybe they'd take him somewhere safe, somewhere with food and water, and the pole swung toward his neck. Max dodged on instinct, the loop missing by inches. The man cursed, advanced again. The second officer raised the tranquilizer gun. Max bolted. His paws scrambled on wet pavement as he tore through the alley, breath ragged, the sound of boots pounding behind him. Left. Right. Another alley. A fence, too high. He veered, squeezing between a dumpster and a wall, metal scraping his already wounded side. "Don't let it get away." The word it landed like a stone in water. Not him. Not Max. It. He burst onto a side street, nearly hit by a pickup truck. The driver laid on the horn. Max kept running, legs burning, vision tunneling. Behind him, the animal control truck's siren wailed. The train yard materialized ahead. Rusted tracks, abandoned boxcars, weeds choking the rails. Max dove beneath a cargo container, squeezing into a gap barely wide enough for his body. Metal pressed against his spine. He could smell oil and rot and years of neglect. He waited, lungs heaving, as boots crunched past. Lost him. Check the tracks. Forget it. Thing's probably halfway to the next county by now. Thing. Max pressed deeper into the shadows, making himself as small as possible. His reflection caught in a puddle of rainwater, matted fur, wild eyes, scars across his muzzle from the coyote fight. He looked feral, monstrous. But he wasn't. Inside his chest, his heart still beat the same rhythm it always had. The one that said loyal. The one that said good boy. The one that remembered Adeline's hand scratching behind his ears, and Mark's laugh when Max brought back the tennis ball for the 100th time. He was still that dog. The world just couldn't see it anymore. Night fell. The town's lights glittered in the distance, warm and unreachable. Max curled into the smallest shape he could manage, nose tucked under his tail, shivering despite the mild air. Tomorrow he'd move again. Tomorrow he'd keep walking. Because the people in this town didn't want him. But maybe, Mark and Adeline still did. He had to believe that. It was all he had left. The man's cabin appeared through morning fog like something from another time. Weathered wood, smoke curling from a stone chimney, surrounded by pines so thick they swallowed sound. Max had been walking for 9 days since the town, surviving on creek water and whatever he could catch. His body was failing. Each step felt like the last one. He collapsed at the edge of the clearing. When consciousness returned, he was inside. Warmth pressed against his skin. A fire crackled nearby. Something soft cushioned his body. Blankets, real blankets, the kind that smelled like soap and sunshine. Max's eyes opened slowly, unfocused, and found a face watching him from across the room. The man was old, 70, maybe more. His hands were gnarled like tree roots, his face mapped with lines that spoke of years lived hard. But his eyes were gentle, patient. He sat in a wooden chair, a rifle leaning against the wall beside him. Not a threat, just a fact of living alone in the wilderness. "You're awake," the man said. His voice was rough, unused to conversation. "Wasn't sure you'd make it through the night." Max tried to stand. His legs buckled immediately. "Easy." The man rose slowly, knees popping, and crossed to where Max lay. He knelt with difficulty, one hand extended palm down, non-threatening, letting Max decide. "Name's Howard. You got a name, boy?" Max's nose twitched. The man smelled like wood smoke and coffee and something medicinal. No cologne, no perfume, no trace of Mark or Adeline. He was safe here. Max's instincts knew it, but safety wasn't what he was searching for. Still, his body betrayed him. When Howard placed a bowl of warm broth nearby, Max's restraint shattered. He drank desperately, sloppily, broth splashing across the floorboards. Howard didn't scold him, just refilled the bowl. The days that followed blurred into routine. Howard cleaned Max's wounds with steady hands that had clearly done this before. For other animals, maybe for soldiers, maybe for himself. He wrapped the infected gash on Max's flank with fresh bandages twice daily. He cooked simple meals, rice, chicken, vegetables, and shared them without ceremony. Max ate, slept, healed. On the 4th day, he stood without trembling. On the 7th, he walked the perimeter of the cabin without limping. Howard watched from the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette, saying nothing but seeing everything. "You're getting strong again," Howard said one evening as Max sat beside his chair. The old man's hand rested on Max's head, fingers scratching absently. "Good. That's good." But Max's eyes kept drifting east, toward the tree line, toward the road he'd abandoned to reach this place. The scent was fading. Each day he stayed, the ghost of that exhaust, that perfume, that invisible thread connecting him to home grew thinner. He could feel it slipping away like water through his paws. Howard noticed. Of course he noticed. On the 14th morning, Howard packed a small canvas bag, jerky, a tin of water, a wool blanket. He set it by the door, then opened it wide. Cold air rushed in. Beyond the threshold, the forest waited. The road waited. Everything Max had been chasing waited. "I know you gotta go," Howard said quietly. His voice cracked on the last word. "Wherever you're headed, whoever you're looking for, I hope they deserve you, boy. I really do." Max looked up at him. Howard's eyes were wet. "Go on now." Max stepped through the door. Stopped. Turned back. He pressed his body against Howard's legs one final time, the way he used to with Mark, the way that meant "thank you and I'll remember, and you mattered." Then he walked into the trees and didn't look back. Behind him, Howard stood in the doorway watching until Max disappeared, one hand raised in a silent goodbye to a dog who'd reminded him what loyalty looked like, and how badly the world failed to return it. The river appeared on the 32nd day like a wall between Max and everything he'd lost. It stretched wide and merciless, ice forming in jagged sheets along the banks where the current slowed. But the center still moved, black water churning beneath a skin of frost, carrying branches and debris downstream at speeds that promised death to anything foolish enough to enter. Max stood at the edge, paws sinking into frozen mud, and felt the weight of impossibility settle onto his shoulders. He'd followed the scent here. The thread had grown stronger over the past week, pulling him forward with a certainty that bordered on faith. The car had crossed this river. The bridge was visible a half-mile north, rusted metal spanning the water, salvation within sight. But the storm had other plans. It hit an hour before dusk. The sky turned the color of old bruises, then opened. Snow fell in thick curtains that erased the world, turning everything white and directionless. The temperature plummeted. Wind screamed across the plains, cutting through Max's coat like knives. He tried for the bridge, made it 200 yards before the snow became so thick he couldn't see his own paws. He turned back, disoriented, following his own tracks until they vanished beneath fresh powder. When the river reappeared, he drifted downstream. The bridge was gone, swallowed by the storm. Max was alone in the whiteout with a river he couldn't cross, and a night that would kill him if he stayed exposed. He found shelter beneath an overturned boat, hull thick with ice, barely large enough for his body. He curled tight, shivering violently, watching snow pile against the opening. The cold was absolute. It seeped into his bones, into his thoughts, turning everything sluggish and dim. His stomach was concave now. Ribs jutted like exposed framework. He'd eaten nothing but frozen carrion for 3 days. A dead rabbit he'd found half buried in snow, frozen solid, barely digestible. His body was cannibalizing muscle. His movements had grown mechanical, automatic, driven by something deeper than conscious thought. The storm lasted 2 days. When it finally broke, Max could barely stand. His paws were cracked and bleeding, one pad split completely, leaving crimson prints in the snow. Frostbite had blackened the tips of his ears. His tail, once proud, always wagging, hung limp and damaged, but the scent was still there. Faint, fractured by the storm, but there, on the other side of the river. Max stared at the water. Ice had thickened along the edges, stretching further toward the center, but the current still moved. Deadly, certain, he tested the ice with one paw. It held. He added weight. Still held. He stepped onto it. The ice groaned beneath him, a sound like the earth splitting. Max froze, weight distributed across all 4 paws, barely breathing. The groaning stopped. He took another step. Another. The far bank was 60 feet away. 50. 40. The ice cracked. Not a groan this time. A sharp report like a gunshot. Fractures spiderwebbed beneath his paws. Max lunged forward, desperate, claws scrabbling for purchase. The ice gave way. Cold swallowed him whole. Shock so complete his lungs seized. Water filled his mouth, his nose, pulling him down into darkness that had no bottom. The current grabbed him, spun him, slammed him against submerged rocks. His legs kicked frantically, searching for surface, for air, for anything solid. His head broke through. One breath, sharp, burning, then under again. The current dragged him downstream, tumbling him like debris. His paws found nothing. His vision tunneled. This was drowning. This was dying. This was how it ended, alone in freezing water, chasing ghosts toward a home that might not want him back. His body hit something solid, a boulder, a log, something anchored. Max's claws found purchase, dug in with everything left in his failing muscles. He pulled, kicked, dragged himself inch by inch against the current until his head broke surface again. The bank was 3 feet away, 3 feet that felt like miles. Max pulled himself onto the ice shelf, then onto frozen mud, then collapsed. Water streamed from his coat. His body shook so violently his teeth chattered. He couldn't stand, couldn't think, could barely breathe, but he was across. He lay there as the sun set, as his body temperature dropped toward the point of no return, as the rational part of his brain whispered that this was enough, that he'd done enough. Then no one could blame him for stopping here. But then the wind shifted, and Max caught it again. Gasoline and exhaust, and the ghost of lavender perfume, stronger now than it had been in weeks. They were close. His body was broken. His spirit was fracturing, but the scent didn't lie. Max forced his legs beneath him, stood, swayed, steadied. and started walking. The neighborhood appeared on the 47th day like a memory made solid. Max stood at the crest of Maple Street, legs trembling, and felt recognition flood through him with such force it nearly buckled his knees. That house with the blue shutters, he'd barked at their cat. That corner with the stop sign, he'd waited there every morning for the school bus, tail wagging at children who'd scratch his ears through the fence. That fire hydrant, that mailbox, that crack in the sidewalk where Mark once tripped carrying groceries. Home. He'd walked 1,847 miles, through deserts and mountains, across frozen rivers and empty highways. He'd fought coyotes, survived starvation, escaped animal control. He'd lost a third of his body weight. Frostbite had taken the tips of his ears and part of his tail. Scars crisscrossed his body like a map of suffering. But he was home. Max moved down the street slowly, each step deliberate, his eyes fixed on the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. The house with the white fence and the oak tree in the front yard. The house where he'd lived his entire life, where every corner held a memory, where love had once been as certain as sunrise. He turned the corner and stopped. A dog was in the yard. Small, fluffy, golden fur that caught the afternoon light. It pranced across the grass, tail wagging in tight, enthusiastic circles, chasing a tennis ball that bounced against the fence. The same fence Max used to patrol. The same yard where he'd dug holes Mark always filled in with frustrated affection. The same oak tree he'd slept under on summer afternoons. But this wasn't his yard anymore. The front door opened. Mark stepped out, smiling, holding a coffee mug. He looked good, rested. His hair was shorter. He'd lost the tension that used to live in his shoulders. He called something back into the house. His voice warm, easy, nothing like the hollow tone from that last day. Adeline appeared in the doorway, wearing the yellow scarf, the one Max used to tug as a puppy. She laughed at something Mark said, then bent down as the golden dog bounded toward them, all wiggles and joy. She scratched behind its ears, the same way she used to scratch Max's. "Good girl, Daisy," her voice carried across the yard. "Such a good girl." Max stood frozen behind the fence across the street, hidden partially by a neighbor's hedge. His body had gone rigid. His tail, what remained of it, hung motionless. They looked happy, not haunted, not guilty, not like people who'd spent 47 days wondering if the dog they'd abandoned was alive or dead. They looked like people who'd made a difficult decision, gotten past it, and moved on. Because they had. The realization didn't crash over Max like a wave. It seeped in slowly, like poison, turning every memory cold. They hadn't lost him. They'd chosen this. Chosen a dog that fit their new life. A dog the apartment would allow. A dog that didn't come with complications or guilt or the weight of a decision they'd rather forget. Mark tossed the ball again. Daisy exploded after it, clumsy and eager, everything a puppy should be. Adeline clapped her hands, encouraging. They were building new memories, new routines, a new version of family that didn't include the dog who'd crossed a continent to find them. Max took one step forward. His paw touched the street. Mark's head turned slightly, perhaps catching movement in his peripheral vision. For one suspended moment, Max thought their eyes might meet, thought Mark might see him, really see him, and recognize what he'd become, what he'd endured, what he'd sacrificed to come back. But Mark's gaze slid past him, unfocused, seeing nothing but an anonymous stray in the shadows. A problem for someone else to handle. He turned back to Adeline, said something that made her laugh, and went inside. The door closed. Daisy continued playing in the yard, oblivious. Max stood in the street, a ghost in his own neighborhood, and felt something inside him finally break. Not his body, that had broken days ago. Not his will, that had carried him across impossible distances. Something deeper, the thing that had kept him moving when logic said stop. The thing that had made him believe, despite everything, that love was waiting at the end. Faith. It shattered quietly, without ceremony, like ice cracking beneath weight it was never meant to carry. Max turned away from the house. His legs moved automatically, carrying him back up the street, past the familiar landmarks that now felt like gravesites. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay here, staring at the life that had replaced him. Watching the people he'd loved prove they'd never loved him back. Not the way he'd loved them. Not the way a dog loves. Completely. Unconditionally. Even when it destroys you. Mrs. Chen had lived on Maple Street for 32 years and never forgot a face. Especially not the scarred pitbull who used to sleep on her porch during thunderstorms because Mark and Adeline's garage made him nervous. She was watering her roses when she saw him limping past, and the garden hose slipped from her hands. Max? The dog stopped. Turned. His eyes were different. Hollow. Ancient. But the small white patch above his right paw was unmistakable. She'd recognize it anywhere. "Oh my God, Max, is that you?" Within an hour, her phone call had reached the local news. Within 3 hours, a van with a satellite dish was parked outside the Vance residence. Within 6 hours, the story had gone viral. Dog walks 1,847 miles home only to find he was replaced. And the internet had done what the internet does best: weaponized outrage. The police arrived first, 2 officers, uncomfortable, flanked by animal control. Then the cameras. Then the crowd. Neighbors who'd known Max, strangers who'd followed the story online, people holding signs that read, "Justice for Max," and "Breed doesn't define heart." Mark opened the door to a wall of lenses and shouted questions. "Mr. Vance, did you abandon your dog in Colorado? Is it true you left him on the highway? What do you have to say to people calling you a coward?" Mark's face drained of color. Behind him, Adeline appeared in the doorway, still holding Daisy, her expression frozen in disbelief. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Max was gone. Max was supposed to be gone, but Max wasn't gone. He sat at the edge of the crowd, 50 feet back, flanked by 2 animal control officers who'd given up trying to catch him after he'd led them on a 20-minute chase through backyards. He'd stopped running when he'd seen the cameras, when he'd seen Mark and Adeline on the porch. Now he just sat, watching, statue still except for the slight rise and fall of his chest. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Mark. "Sir, Mrs. Chen says this dog crossed nearly 2,000 miles to get back to you. Can you confirm you left him in Colorado?" Mark's mouth opened, closed. His lawyer's voice screamed in his head. "Don't say anything, don't admit anything." But the cameras were unblinking and the crowd was growing, and Adeline's hand trembled on his arm. We couldn't keep him," Mark said finally. His voice cracked. "The apartment didn't allow pit bulls. We tried to find him a home. We tried everything. We thought someone would find him. Someone would take care of him. So you left him on the side of a highway and drove away? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Mr. Vance?" Adeline stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't have a choice. We had nowhere to go. We couldn't be homeless because of a dog." The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped. Angry, disgusted, disbelieving. Someone threw a plastic water bottle that clattered on the porch. The police moved forward, hands raised, calling for calm. Through it all, Max watched. He watched Mark's face crumble into something between shame and defensiveness. Watched Adeline clutch Daisy like a shield. Watched them become strangers. Not the people who'd raised him, but the people who'd chosen convenience over loyalty, comfort over conscience. A reporter turned toward Max, camera following. "Can we get a shot of the dog?" The crowd parted slightly. Max stood slowly, favoring his injured paw, his body a testament to the journey that had nearly killed him. The camera zoomed in. The scars, the frostbitten ears, the ribs pressing against matted fur, the eyes that had seen too much. For a moment, everything went silent. Mark's gaze finally found Max's across the distance. Their eyes locked. Mark saw what he'd done, saw it written in every scar, every missing pound, every step that had brought Max home. The guilt that he'd buried under rationalizations and new routines rose up like a tidal wave. "Max," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so..." Max turned away, not with anger, not with aggression, just a simple, deliberate turn that said more than teeth or growls ever could. He walked through the crowd, which parted like water, and headed back up the street, away from the house, away from the people who'd thrown him away, away from a home that had never really been his. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "Max, wait." But Max kept walking. Behind him, Adeline collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing. Mark stood frozen, one hand still raised as if he could call Max back, as if words could undo what had been done. The cameras captured it all. The confrontation, the admission, the moment a dog's dignity shattered the lies 2 people had been telling themselves for 47 days. And in the morning, when the story aired on every major network, millions would watch Mark and Adeline's shame made public. But Max wouldn't see it. He'd already said goodbye. Howard saw Max's face on the evening news and knew before the story finished that he'd be making the drive. The footage played on repeat, Max turning away from Mark and Adeline, walking through the crowd with his head high despite everything his body had endured. The anchor's voice trembled with emotion as she recounted the journey. 47 days, 1,847 miles, survival against odds that should have been impossible. Howard turned off the television, packed a bag, and drove 12 hours straight to Pennsylvania. He found Max at the county shelter, isolated in a back kennel away from the other dogs. Not for aggression, the staff had been clear about that, but because the media circus had made him too valuable, too vulnerable. People were offering thousands for him. Rescue organizations were fighting over custody. Everyone wanted the dog who'd become a symbol, but Max just wanted to be left alone. He lay in the corner, nose tucked under what remained of his tail, eyes open but unfocused. He'd stopped eating again, stopped responding to voices. The shelter director said he'd been like this for 3 days, ever since the confrontation. Like something inside him had finally given up. Howard knelt outside the kennel gate. He didn't call out, didn't make demands, just waited the way he'd waited in his cabin, patient as stone, until Max's ear twitched, until those hollow eyes found his face. Recognition flickered. Max stood slowly, legs shaking, and walked to the gate. He pressed his nose through the chain link, breathing in wood smoke and coffee, and the scent of the only person who'd ever let him leave on his own terms. "You ready to come home, boy?" Howard's voice was rough. Real home this time. One you don't have to walk back to. Max's tail, damaged, shorter, but still his, wagged once. The adoption paperwork took 4 hours to process through lawyers and rescue organizations and news outlets demanding exclusive interviews. Howard signed everything without reading it, one hand resting on Max's head the entire time, anchoring him to something solid while the world argued over who owned his story. By the time they reached the truck, the parking lot had filled with cameras. "Mr. Howard, what are your plans for Max? Will you be doing a book deal? Has anyone from Hollywood contacted you about the film rights?" Howard opened the passenger door. Max jumped in, still graceful despite everything, and curled on the bench seat. Howard closed the door, turned to the cameras, and spoke the only words he'd give them. "This dog doesn't owe you people anything. He's been through enough. Leave him alone." He drove away before they could ask another question. Behind them, the media frenzy continued without its central figure. Max's story had ignited something larger than one dog's journey. Pitbull advocacy groups used his image on billboards. Judge the deed, not the breed. Breed-specific legislation began facing challenges in 3 states. Shelters reported a 300% increase in pitbull adoptions. Mark and Adeline became the villains in a story hungry for justice. The district attorney filed animal cruelty charges, abandonment with intent to harm. Their lawyer argued it was a civil matter at best, but the evidence was damning. The note, the location, the testimony from Mrs. Chen about their evasive responses when neighbors had asked about Max months ago. The trial lasted 6 days. They were convicted on 2 counts, sentenced to community service, fined $10,000, and banned from owning animals for 10 years. But the legal consequences were merciful compared to what followed. Their names became synonymous with betrayal. Adeline lost her job when protesters picketed the restaurant. Mark's supervisor transferred him to a warehouse 3 states away. Not fired, but clearly unwanted. Their apartment lease wasn't renewed. Friends stopped calling. Family members gave careful, diplomatic distances. They'd wanted a fresh start. They got one, just not the kind they'd imagined. But none of it reached the cabin where Max was learning to heal. Howard never turned on the television, never checked the internet, never mentioned the trial or the protesters, or the movie deals being negotiated without their input. He just lived the way he always had. Quiet mornings, simple meals, long walks through forest where no one cared about fame or symbolism or what breed you were. Max grew stronger. The frostbite scars faded to white. His ribs disappeared beneath healthy weight. His eyes lost their hollow look, replaced by something gentler. Not the innocent trust of before, that was gone forever, but a hard-won peace. On warm afternoons, he slept on the porch, while Howard smoked and whittled. Sometimes tourists found the cabin, drawn by GPS coordinates leaked online, hoping for photos with the famous dog. Howard sent them away politely, but firmly. Max wasn't a symbol. He was just a dog who'd survived something terrible and deserved to be left alone. And on quiet nights, when the wind moved through the pines and the fire crackled low, Max would rest his head on Howard's knee and feel something he hadn't felt since that last day in the car. Safe. Not because someone promised they'd never leave, but because someone had already proven they'd let him stay. Max lived 6 more years in the cabin, and they were the best years of his life. Not because of comfort, though Howard made sure he never wanted for food or warmth. Not because of fame, though letters arrived weekly from around the world. Children's drawings, thank you notes from adopters who'd chosen pit bulls because of his story. Photos of dogs who'd been saved because someone had seen Max's face and decided breed didn't define worth. The years were good because they were quiet, because Max could sleep without fear, because when Howard said stay, he meant until morning, not forever. The cabin became a sanctuary for more than just Max. Howard started taking in dogs the shelters deemed unadoptable. The scarred ones, the scared ones, the ones who'd seen the worst of humanity and needed time to remember there was anything else. At any given time, 3 or 4 dogs shared the porch, the yard, the space, by the fire. Max became their teacher, the elder, the one who showed them, without words, that survival was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that not all humans were the same. He moved slower as the years passed. His joints stiffened on cold mornings. The frostbite damage left him sensitive to winter, so Howard knitted him a ridiculous red sweater that Max tolerated with dignified patience. His muzzle turned gray, then white, but his eyes stayed sharp and kind, carrying wisdom that younger dogs seemed to sense instinctively. On his 9th birthday, calculated from shelter records, though no one knew the real date, Howard baked him a cake made of ground beef and sweet potato. 5 rescue dogs sang an off-key chorus of howls. Max ate his slice slowly, savoring it, surrounded by misfits who'd become family. 3 months later, the invitation arrived. The city of Denver, the same state where Max had been abandoned, wanted to honor him. They'd commissioned a statue, bronze, life-sized, to be installed in front of the new animal shelter that had been built with donations made in Max's name. They wanted him there for the unveiling. Howard almost declined. Max was 10 now, nearly 11. The drive would be hard on him. The crowds would be overwhelming. They'd earned their peace. But Max's tail wagged when Howard mentioned Denver. Just once, as if some part of him remembered that this was where his journey had truly begun. Not on the highway where he'd been left, but in the moment he'd decided to walk home. They made the drive in early autumn, windows down, Max's head resting on the doorframe, wind ruffling his grayed fur. Howard had to stop every hour for Max to stretch his legs, but they weren't in a hurry. They never were anymore. The plaza was packed when they arrived. Thousands of people, families with their pit bulls, rescue workers, advocates, news crews. A stage had been erected in front of a massive object, covered in burgundy cloth. Signs dotted the crowd. Max changed my mind. Adopted because of you. Hero doesn't describe a breed. When Howard helped Max from the truck, the crowd went silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire plaza erupted in applause. Not the frantic energy of the confrontation, but something reverent. Grateful. The sound of people acknowledging that this scarred elderly dog had changed something fundamental in how a nation viewed an entire breed. Max walked through the parted crowd slowly, Howard beside him, to the base of the covered statue. A woman approached, the mayor, Howard was told, and knelt to Max's level. Her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she whispered, scratching behind his ear, "for showing us what we'd been too blind to see." She stood and pulled the cord. The cloth fell away. The statue depicted Max mid-stride, head raised, eyes fixed on some distant horizon. But it wasn't the Max of the journey, emaciated and desperate. It was Max as he should have been all along, strong, dignified, noble. Around the base, words were engraved in bronze. Max, who walked 1,847 miles not for revenge, but for home, who survived not through hatred, but through hope, who taught us that loyalty has no breed and forgiveness no limit. The crowd applauded again, cameras flashed, children pressed forward to touch the statue's paws. But Max's attention had fixed on something else, the figure standing at the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a pillar. Mark, older, grayer, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He'd come alone, uninvited, just to see if the stories were true, if Max had really survived, if there was any chance the dog might remember him. Their eyes met across the distance. Mark's face crumbled, his hand rose slightly. A gesture that might have been apology or plea, or simply acknowledgement of everything he'd destroyed. Max looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned back to the statue, to the crowd, to Howard's steady hand on his head. He'd walked nearly 2,000 miles chasing the ghost of what Mark had meant to him. He wouldn't walk another step. When the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Mark was gone. Howard never asked if Max had seen him. Some recognitions didn't need words. They drove home as the sun set. Max stretched across the bench seat, head in Howard's lap. His breathing was slow and even, content. He'd lived long enough to see his pain transformed into purpose, his suffering into salvation for thousands of dogs who'd come after him. 3 years later, when Max finally closed his eyes for the last time, peacefully, in his sleep, surrounded by the dogs he'd taught and the man who'd let him heal, his ashes were scattered in the forest behind the cabin. But his statue remained, and on its base, children still place flowers, families still take photos. And people who'd never met Max still stop to read the inscription and remember the dog who proved that love, real love, doesn't abandon. It endures, even when it costs everything. Especially then. Max's story reminds us that loyalty, courage, and forgiveness aren't defined by breed, they're defined by heart. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel for more incredible true stories that celebrate the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. And if you've ever rescued a dog, or been rescued by one, share your story in the comments below. Let's honor Max's legacy together.